Hey, all my wonderful subscribers, it's your girl, the Heartfelt Honey here, and I know I haven't been on here in a very long time. And I'm coming on today because I wanted to film my labor and delivery story. Only because a couple of my friends are pregnant at the moment, and I get questions here and there about how things went. And more of us are having children in my age range and things like that. So I wanted to come on and kind of share my story and experience. So I'm going to hop right into it. So I went into labor with my son on September 15th of 2019. My son is currently 16 months old, which is like mind-boggling to me. And so the day that I woke up that morning and I felt like just kind of tired, and I felt like some kind of pain in my back, not like severe pain, but just like back pain a little bit here and there. And I started not to go to work that morning, but I went anyway because we were short staffed, and you know how work stuff goes, and everybody had called out. So if I hadn't gone in, there would have been no one in the office from my team. So I was just like, I can't not go in the office. Or at least I felt that way. So I went in the office, and all day long at work, I kept having those back pains. And so I would go in the nursing room that was set up for moms to nurse and like do cat cows. If you're familiar with yoga, you know what cat cows are. And so I just kept doing those. And I had been doing it all throughout the day, but I was working so much that I would just stop and do it and go back and things like that, and drinking my water, thinking, okay, I drink my water. And then I text my cousin who had a baby boy 2 months before I had my son, and I was asking her, I'm having pain in my back. Is this okay? She was like, oh yeah, that's normal towards the end of the pregnancy. Don't worry about it, because my due date was October 11th. So I had a month, left to go in my pregnancy. So I wasn't thinking anything about being in labor. So I went home, and when I got home, I went to the bathroom, and there was blood in the toilet, and then blood all over the floor. And so, long story short, I ended up in an ambulance and was taken to my the closest hospital to where I live. And so, when I got there, the biggest thing that was going through my mind after seeing the blood, after all of it, is, God wouldn't bring me this far in the pregnancy for me to lose my son, because I was 36 weeks pregnant at the time. And so I went ahead and when I got to the doctor, they took me in the emergency. And when the doctor finally got to me, she checked for the heartbeat for the baby, and he had a heartbeat. And I automatically started crying because I was like, thank God he has a heartbeat. He's still with us. And so then she checked me down there and told me that I was 2.5 centimeters dilated. And so she was like, how did you not know, like, that you were in labor? I was like, well, I'm due October 11th, so I wasn't thinking about being in labor. She was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And so they admitted me, of course, and then she said, we're going to give you a steroid for your son's lungs, and nobody will touch you. We don't want you to deliver for like the next 48 hours. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I got to the hospital. It was probably around 8:30 when I got to the hospital. And so then it was Hurricane Florence. And so we were trying to see if I could be transferred to the hospital where I was receiving care, like my prenatal care and everything. But as it turns out, that hospital was full because it was Hurricane Florence, and people were saying that something in the paramedic pressure, I'm not saying the right word, was causing a lot of women to go into labor. And so with that, like, I couldn't be transferred because where I was going, my hospital where I had established care was full. Like, they were completely full. And it's so funny because I had the tour for that hospital the week before, the Sunday, no, the Saturday, no, it was a Sunday. It was the Sunday before. So this is a Friday where I went into labor, September the 14th. And I had the tour of the hospital that Sunday before. And I asked them about what happens if they're full. And they said, like, we're never full. So I was thinking, I would be able to be transferred, but they were full. So I had to stay where I was. And it was, like I said, I got there around like 8:30 p.m. And so I labored. I had contractions whenever I would have contractions, I would just breathe through them. I will link the videos that were very helpful to me during my whole labor experience, because I watched a lot of YouTube videos about natural childbirth before, during throughout my pregnancy, and different ways to move your hips and different exercises to help with contractions. Because I didn't take any classes or anything, I didn't have time to actually do any of that. So like those YouTube videos came in handy. So I'll link those down below. Maybe they'll be helpful to somebody. But uh, yeah, so I labored throughout the night. I went to sleep, I feel like around, maybe, I don't know, maybe like 3 o'clock or so in the morning. And then morning came and I was up, and I was on the phone with people and talking to people. And I would have contractions and I would stop and I would do the breaths, and then the contractions would go away. But somewhere around noon, I started to like feel kind of nauseous. And so around like maybe 2 or 2:30, I went in the bathroom because I kept feeling like I needed to have a bowel movement. And I went into the bathroom to see if I could do that. And I ended up throwing up all over the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom trying to clean up the throw up, and the nurse knocks on the door and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I threw up." And she was like, she opened the door. She was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm trying to clean up the throw up. I threw up." And she was like, "You're not supposed to be cleaning up the throw up." And anybody who knows me knows I don't like people having to do stuff for me. So it was hard for me to like stop. And so she's like, "Get up," and like I'm just like, I'm leaving this mess in the bathroom. She said she would take care of it. And they put me back on the bed, and she was like, "We know the doctor said not to check you, but we're gonna ask to see if we can check you." And so at this point, it's like 2 o'clock or so, and they check me, and they tell me that I'm 9.5 centimeters dilated, and it's time for me to push. So I say no. I'm not pushing. The doctor told me that I wouldn't deliver for like another 48 hours. I just got here last night. Like, no, I'm not pushing. I haven't eaten anything. I'm tired. I haven't had any sleep. Like, like I'm not about to push a baby out. And so they were like, "No, you need to get ready to push." And I'm like, "I want to talk to the doctor." And so, long story short, I refused to push. And then around, I would say maybe 4:30 or 5, my son decided that he was coming whether I was ready to push or not. And so, long story short, my body started to push itself. Side note, I want to stop and say this before I forget. Listen to your body. If I had listened to my body when I got up that morning, I would have never went to work that day. If I had really listened to my body, um, I maybe would have left work and tried to see why I was having that back pain. If I had listened to my body, I feel like a lot of all of this kind of stuff would have been avoided. But because I wasn't listening to my body and listening to my mind, I wasn't really being in tune with myself and focusing so much on all the things I had going on, I missed, I feel like, which valuable cues that would have been able to tell me something's going on. Even if I wouldn't have thought, "Oh, I'm in labor." I would have thought something is going on. So anyway, that's the biggest tip I would give to any woman who is pregnant and wondering about, how will I know if I went into labor or anything like that? Because I wanted all those same things. Just listen to your body. Your body is very smart. Just like you didn't know you were pregnant until you took that pregnancy test, but your body already knew you were pregnant. And it's so funny. Another aside is that I had put all of my stuff that needs to go to the hospital with me at the front door 2 weeks before this. So, like, my body was sending me all of the messages that I needed to know that it was coming time. And then I had like really bad back pain that Sunday after going to the tour and stuff and walking around, and I had DJ'd a party the Saturday before the Sunday that I went on the tour. So like I was burning myself out and still trying to do like the most, but my body was trying to tell me to slow down and I just wasn't listening. And I was pressuring myself to do all of these things that I had on my agenda of things to do, whether it be work or personal or whatever, but I wasn't listening to my body telling me to stop. And um, so I would say, listen to your body. Your body is trying to tell you what you need to do. And so, at any rate, I ended up having to push, of course, and I didn't know how to push at first. I couldn't get the concept, and they were telling me to push, and I couldn't get it. And I wanted to push on my knees. I always wanted to push on my knees. I never wanted to push on my back. But because I was at a hospital, that wasn't the hospital where I established care. Um, I ended up having to push on my back. And I got my son out and he came out, and I'll get to that. Before I get to that part, I want to talk about, I want to rewind a little bit and talk about when I found out I was pregnant and establishing care. So the hospital where I established care, I'm not going to bring up the hospital name or anything like that because I don't want any lawsuits or anything like that. But the doctor, when I would go to see her, she would ask me certain questions. I would be in her office in the doctor's room for maybe about 10 minutes and then be sent on my way. And I didn't think anything of it because I mean it was my first baby and I didn't really know what to expect or not to expect. So I'm thinking that this is okay. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, I feel like I'm not getting enough attention. So I transitioned into a different role at my job. And my coworker said, oh, I go to the midwives. Maybe you should try the midwives. So I transferred over to the midwives. And everything that I had established with the first doctor transferred over to the midwives team. And so they had the same due date and everything, and they would check me when I went to my midwives appointments. And they had a very, if you know anything about midwives, they have a very low, like, they don't check you a lot. They don't really, probe a lot. They kind of like, it's a more natural process. And so I had a doctor's appointment the Wednesday before I had my son, before I went into labor with my son, because I went into labor with him on the 14th of September. But I had an appointment that Wednesday, and for like the last two, I would say maybe three appointments, including that one, I kept being told, "Oh, he's head down. His head is down. He's in a perfect position. His head is down." And I'm thinking, "Oh, that's great." And some people, have problems with their baby flipping, so I thank God for that. And I should also add, my pregnancy physically was so easy. I hate to say that sometimes because people get, people are very sensitive. Everybody's pregnancy is different, but God blessed me in that way. I'm grateful. This is not a brag. I'm grateful. Physically, my pregnancy was very, very easy. My son was very easy on me, and I'm so grateful for that. But so I didn't have any problems during pregnancy or anything that would have alluded to the fact that my son was going to come 26 days early. There was no indication of that because the pregnancy had been so smooth. So at any rate, I was never checked down there where they do the vaginal checks. And as I talk to friends and other people who have had children, they tell me that at some point when you start having your appointments on a like weekly, bi-weekly basis, they'll start to check you down there. And I was never checked down there, not once. So at any rate, when my son came out, there was a pediatrician on staff to come check him because he was technically premature. And like I said, they wanted me to keep him in for another 48 hours before delivering him. And they were giving me a steroid to strengthen his lungs. Also, cannot forget to mention this. When I was admitted to the hospital, I was given a band for me and a band for my baby, both across my belly. And as it turns out, the band was not working that was supposed to be monitoring my contractions. So the whole time, I said I got to the hospital at like 8:30 at night, and then I threw up around like maybe 1 or 2 or so in the afternoon of the next day. Um, the band wasn't registering how strong my contractions were. So when they finally figured that out, they put the band on me that was actually working. The first contraction that came through was an 8. So I had been having these really strong contractions and nobody knew. And that would have been another indication that I was dilating or getting to the point where I was dilating up to 9.5 centimeters. And so I had a friend ask me the other day, did you do it naturally? I'm like, yes. And that was what I wanted. But I didn't even have a choice about an epidural because I didn't know that my contractions were that strong. I didn't know that I was dilating. I didn't know anything because nobody was checking me down there. So when they told me I was 9.5 centimeters dilated, it was too late to do anything with like an epidural. It was too late for any of that. It was go time. And so at any rate, My son was born. The pediatrician had to come and check him like right away, and he came out. He was 6 pounds 10 ounces, and the first thing the pediatrician said was, "Oh, he has his lines." And I didn't know what that meant, but now I know it meant that he had his lines in his fingers and things like that, which is an indication that he was okay and like full term. So I ended up being in the hospital for 4 days after having my son. Every test in the world was ran on him, and the pediatrician came in on the last day and finally said, we couldn't find anything to suggest that there's something off or wrong with your son. They were monitoring him every 5 hours. They had to stick his feet to see if his blood sugars and things were okay. And it was very painful to watch because they're sticking your baby's foot. At one point, I even asked, could you just use the same hole that you used the last time? Because his feet were covered in band-aids from where they had been sticking him. He even had to get a butterfly. Um, God, it's hard for me to talk about. He had to get a butterfly um, needle in his hand to draw blood so they can test him. And he passed all of his tests. Everything was fine. And so on the last day, the pediatrician said, I'm sorry I can't give you anything more, but it sounds like you just had the wrong due date. So, I had to get in touch with my midwives after I had my son, and they asked me the same thing and this was like the day after I had my son. They said, "Do you think you had the wrong due date when you were initially, checked?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. The doctor that I've established care with the first time did the test, and that's the date that she gave me. I didn't think to, like, I guess, like." That it could be wrong, I don't know. And it was my first child, so I didn't know anything. So, yes, that's kind of how it ended. Um, we were in the hospital for 4 days after he was born. He was born healthy. He was born strong. Thank God, everything was fine with him. He latched on to breastfeeding like a champ. I breastfed him for 10 months. I would have gone longer, but life situations happened and I wasn't able to. But it all in all, I can honestly say that I'm glad that he was born healthy, he was born well, and overall, it was a great experience. After I delivered my son, they put him on my chest and they pulled the bed down and they asked me, could I stand up? And so I stood up. And then I started packing up all the stuff in my room. My sister helped me pack up all the stuff in the room and got me ready to go down to my recovery room. And I was walking and everything was fine. And I had just had a baby. Now, granted, I felt sore down there and heavy, but I was able to get up and go. I went home after those 4 days and started washing clothes. And one of my aunts was like, "Look, sit down. You could bleed out moving around like that," because I felt good enough to do these things. But so I give all the glory and the praise to God. It didn't happen, my labor and delivery, the way I would have wanted it to, but it was the way God intended. I believe that. The nurses that I had after I had my son were amazing. They showed me how to pump manually because my son had to stay one night in the NICU away from me, which was like a fight thing for me because I didn't want that. But they showed me how to pump because he wasn't with me, and so I had to pump to get the milk out because I had so much milk just 2 days after having him. It was crazy, and my breast hurt, but everything worked out for good. Everything worked out for good, and I'm so grateful to God for how He really covered and protected me in the whole situation, and that my son made it here healthy and well. And so I thought I'd come share this for somebody who might have questions, and specifically really for my friends who are about to have children of their own. I wish all of you the best, and having your little ones. It's going to be a journey ahead, but it's going to be a great one. And all love and hugs to you all. And I hope to see you all soon in another video.